Up next, we react to the idea that lied to kids that are lied to by their parents, become lying or more likely to become lying, ill-adjusted adults, which has been laid out in a recent study. All right, Tunde, for our next part of today's discussion, I wanted to take us to, we saw this recent study that followed. Now, it wasn't this is hundreds of people that were studied. This isn't some huge study, but it's statistically significant. And what it did is it did through questionnaires, it asked a bunch of people their recollections of being lied to by their parents when they were young, and then also kind of personality and like how they act and interact as adults. And so it's taking both this information, self-reported information from their past, and then self-reported information about how they navigate through the world now. And the correlation that was made, that the more the kids were lied to, or at least being lied to as kids. And this is about like, oh, okay, well, why can't I have this toy, or why can't we go here for dinner, or just kind of the lies of that parents may tell a kid just to not have to give a full answer to something, or a complicated answer or anything like that. But kids that recall being lied to more when they were kids, or people who recall being lied to more when they were kids, tend to lie more as adults and have difficulties in terms of, the term they used was ill-adjusted. So Tunde, what do you make of this study? And I want to ask you both generally, but then also from your own life experience. You've been a kid, and you've also been a parent, and then you have children who you have some grown children, and you have kid that's still a teenager. So you have a wide spectrum of experience here. So both generally and in your own, and we'll get through this over the course of the show. But your reaction to this?
Thanks for acknowledging that I was once a child myself.
Yes. Just to make it clear,
my kids seem to think that I just showed up like this on the earth. That I was
as kids tend to do.
I know. They looked at my mom and said, "Grandma, he just had him like this." So no, it's a very interesting topic, because it makes me realize that this is, I think, part of the foundation of what makes a lot of us in society and humanity just different types of people, and why we probably project on how we are in these ways onto others, and we don't understand sometimes how other people aren't like us. So, and what I mean by that is, because you make a good point, I think it's important to distinct. We're not talking about lies, because obviously the term lie is just telling an untruth. So, telling a lie to your 5-year-old that, there's a monster under the bed if they don't go to sleep or something, and I'm just making something up here. I mean, I think that's a different type of thing than what we're talking about, like chronically lying and maybe presenting one face as a parent, and then in one way in public, and then your child is watching you act a totally different way in private. Or that's certain part of it, though. Like
but remember, they were talking about how threats to, like, hey, if you don't listen to me and come now, I'm going to leave you here. Those type of threats that are based on, now maybe the parent wasn't lying, but yes, your behavior, what they observe you in your behavior, but then also lying to the child, not just how they interact with you in general. So the study did hit on both.
That's important, James, because that's how kids learn how to interact with other people, right? Like, so it's an interesting point you make. What if the parent said, "I'm going to leave you here"? And there's two things. Like, I'm the type of parent that if I say that, I'm leaving my kid because of that, right? Like, on a serious note.
You don't want to
realize that, like, my kid has to trust that I'm serious. Like, and that's why also I didn't make threats like that on a consistent basis, because I didn't want to have a punitive relationship at all times with my kids. But there's other people whose parents will make all these threats and all this. If the parents don't carry through the threat, then that person grows up with a different way of thinking about, I guess.
How do you get somebody to do what you want them to do? You threaten them with something, and then that's how. So you raise the person, like teach them to be more manipulative.
Yeah, because and that's a good point. Maybe that's the type of thing I was looking for. So I'm not a manipulative person. And I think one of the reasons is because of how I was raised. It's kind of the way I just said I raised my kids is my mom didn't, my mom said something, she carried it through. And if she didn't want to threaten me or anything, she didn't say it. So it's I didn't come into this manipulative environment and have to learn how to navigate that as a child for my own survival. And some people do grow up in those kind of environments. And that's what I meant earlier by saying, as I read this and really got into the psychology and thinking about my own childhood, that's when I realized, I just I couldn't relate to someone that grew up different than me in that way. And that's not to say I'm better or worse than them. It made me realize this is where as adults, we can come into conflict with other adults because of upbringing, childhood experiences like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what stood out to me in this was that it's a lot of times things that feel harmless in the moment, but your kid's always watching, So like the example that they gave, like, hey, if you don't come on now, hey, we're trying to leave the mall right now. If we don't come with me now, I'm leaving you here. And you think that, hey, I'm just showing them that I'm serious about this, but either they know I won't leave them, or that's like I can't leave a 5-year-old at the mall, so to speak, or something. But as the parent, you rationalize it in various ways by saying something like that. But the kid is observing that as, again, the kid understands that, hey, they're trying to get me to do something that they want me to do that I don't want to do, and so this is how you do this. So the kid can learn how to interact with other people with that. So I think that part makes a lot of sense. To me, what this is really a call for discipline amongst the parents, because in my own experience, what I know with my kids is that a lot of times for me, it's the things I don't say that where I either catch myself or I just know I don't want to go there. And it's along the lines you said, I don't want to throw out things that I'm not willing to follow through on. It's not flippant. It's not like, hey, if you do this, I'm going to do this. Or like, I'm careful with that. If there's not going to be a big consequence, then I work on something else. Maybe I don't use a stick. Maybe I use a carrot, but I'm careful about the ways I try to compel them to do stuff, which is not easy, because when you're a parent, if your kids are young, if your kids are old, it can grate on you. The young kids have ways to grate on you. The older kids have ways to grate on you, but dealing with being the authority figure is difficult. It's just difficult. It's not something that's easy. You're stressed about your life in general also. And so there's a discipline that's involved that if you want to take the shortcut with a lot of these things as far as how to get your kids to do stuff, or and then you talked about the other thing, how your kids see you navigating through. If you want to take those shortcuts in front of your kids, then you are teaching them at all times, And so that to me is really the takeaway, is that you have to be to the best of your ability in the moment, cognizant of the fact that you're teaching them at all times. And those shortcuts, if you show them to use those shortcuts, then they're going to be more inclined to use those shortcuts, understanding that that's the way to be. The real tricky part here is that may be the way you learned from the way you were raised, And so if you were raised in a way that was more conscious, then maybe you have a leg up in that. But even if you weren't, it's something that you have to keep in mind at all times, is really just the takeaway I have from this.
Yeah, and I think, that's a good example, because what did I say earlier, right? I was raised a certain way in my household that I trusted my mom to be serious when she was, gonna, like you said, if she was gonna leave me at the mall, she said that. That's why I would run and chase her. Like, okay, I know my mom's gonna leave me at this mall, And look, maybe the reality was, and that's why I behaved this way, right? Maybe she really wouldn't leave me in the mall, just like I wouldn't leave a 5-year-old kid in the mall. But what I do is I go around the corner, make them think I left. You know what I mean? Like I'll play that game and say, look, all right, you're gonna stay here and have a tantrum. I'll see you later. And yeah, I might go around the corner, be able to look and make sure the kid's okay, right? But the kid will eventually start coming the direction that I went, right? And what it is really just teaching the child to trust that the authority, when the word is given, that it's going to be delivered. And I think if you create a different environment, then a child will grow up, like you said, either thinking that this is how you deal with people through manipulation and this kind of give and take. I think another example, though, which is interesting, James, and I think I'll start finishing my thoughts on this here, is we have the direct thing, like the parents in our relationship with kids, but then you also have the outside world. And as a parent, sometimes you can't control directly certain things in the environment, but you can also control how you teach your kids about it. And I'm thinking about things like religion. And this is not to pick on any religion. It could be a church, mosque, synagogue. But a lot of times the person, or there's a very hierarchical environment in there. And there's sometimes things that go on where people either can take things as a lie or misdirection, right? Like a kid could say, okay, well, the religious, the person on the stage keeps telling us that we got to help poor people. But then when we always drive by these poor people, we never help them, right? So there's a contradiction there, and how the parent responds to that's very important.
The religion piece is
interesting,
but the religion piece is interesting to me. And again, not to pick on religions, but in a sense, I wonder sometimes if religions kind of train people to lie to their kids about certain things, or to kind of be disingenuous sometimes. Like you said, there are holidays that may involve deceptions that you grow up. And is that really serving the kid, or is that not? I'm not saying it's bad, or I'm not saying it's good. I take note of that. It's like, well, hold up. What benefit are you providing the kid really by that? And are you harming them at all? I know for me, for example, one of the things, and I don't know if this was good or bad, but for me, what I would always do anytime, and my daughter actually picked up on it later, but whenever they would ask me questions that I did not want to tell them the answer to, I would start asking questions back to them. And so I would maybe I'm a lawyer, so it's just kind of, so I would just start saying, oh, well, why do you ask that? Well, what makes you think that, or what? So I would never answer the question. So I would never say something.
That's you being a lawyer.
But I would just kind of play it off. That'd be me being a parent. And so it's like, okay, so I would always, and then, like I said, my daughter at one point realized, like, you never answered that question. You would always just, I'm like, yes, that is correct. That is
like exactly I say, that your profession is one of two things. You're either a rabbi or a lawyer when you start asking so many questions back to somebody. And so for you, sir, I'll say you're an attorney.
but my point, though, is just that kind of the positions that we either have in life or that we find are in a lot of times can influence how we deal with this type of stuff. Like, and again, just if you're in a position where things are very black and white, like, okay, law enforcement, hey, this is either somebody broke the law or they didn't, then that may be how you want to convey things. And so then a child may grow up thinking that things are very black and white and not very nuanced. And again, I'm not saying this in any way as a judgment. It's just kind of, sometimes we bring our own kind of way that we order the world into these interactions with our kids. And so to me, it's interesting to see this, because it's like, okay, you're forming someone else's impression. I think of a Simpsons joke, where Homer talks about how, it's great to have kids. You get to give them all your prejudices. It was a joke, awesome. But it was like, yeah, that's but I know we want to wrap up, man. I'll go ahead and give you something else before we get out of here.
Nah, man, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to keep being honest with my kids where appropriate.
Well, now my question was going to be, so after seeing this, would you do anything different? You still got to take one more through high school.
Nah, I mean, I've always, that's why I said for me, no, because I grew up. I mean, look, there's obviously, on a serious note, right? There's different layers and levels when kids are ready for things, right? We're not going to talk to 5-year-old kids about sex or certain things, and those conversations by the time a kid's 15. You might be engaging in some of that as a parent.
But hold on. You raise a good point there, because it's like, okay, so therefore then if they ask you where kids come from, where babies come from, then that creates this kind of dilemma, so to speak. Like,
yeah, but you can say mommy and daddy, or you can say the stork, right? Like there's ways to.
But that's the distinction.
Yeah. No, you're right. And
for example, though, let me give you another example, because in that scenario, for me, what I did was I would always draw the analogy of like, hey, well, we're animals, we're mammals, so I like with dogs or with whatever. So I would use animals as an example, like, oh, it's the same kind. We're the same kind of, like, that's how we do it, versus like plants, plants, they drop a seed or. Go ahead.
So when your kid grows up to be a furry, then now I got it on fucking recording why this happened.
Hey man, to give a concept.
What was it?
A concept here. We're talking conceptual.
Department of Children and Families. That's what it is.
Hey, Mister. Hey, you talking about me, Mister? I'm gonna tip around the corner with my kid at the mall.
No, so that's what I was gonna joke and say. So no, but let's finish on this is a funny joke. That is true. Doing things like drinking and drugs. How do you deal with that when you're a parent, right?
Yeah.
Now, drinking is easy because there's a law. And so you can be sitting there, I'll be drinking bourbon in front of my 10-year-old kid. And, you can't do this because the law says you can't, and I can. But I'll tell you, the best thing that ever happened to me was when they legalized marijuana in the state for medical purposes, and I got a card. Because then I didn't have to go sneak out back. I sat my youngest kid at the time was 12. And I because with my older two kids, that was a bit of an issue. Like, okay, what do I say? One day when they were young and they were going into, let's say, high school, I knew in my head one day these kids gonna smell some weed at some house party.
Yeah. The smell is they're gonna know.
Yeah,
the smell. Being
correct.
able to not be in the presence won't work anymore.
Yeah, and so, but then once the medical card was there, I remember I just sat my 12. My son was, I think, 12 or 11 at the time. I just sat him down and showed him the card. And I just said, look, man, here, this is what I do. The doctor prescribed it. I didn't have to go into big explanation. And I just told him, I said, just like the whiskey under the cupboard, you can't touch it. You can't do this until you're older and as if a doctor's prescribed it. And that's it. And it made my life easy. I don't lie to him, nothing. I go out back and smoke when I want. And he doesn't care. So in a sense, that's an example, I think, for a lot of parents as relates to those kind of substances, because most people do drink a little bit. Some people do smoke weed and all that. I'm going to talk about legal stuff, obviously. But
as you're recorded, you mean? As you're being recorded.
Hey man, I'll do a blood test right now. And
hey man, I got no accusations. I just that was mighty convenient.
Are there too. Yeah. So no. Well, we are on a recorded line, so I want to make sure I'm very clear about not trying to introduce illegal things to children, right?
Well, but your point, though, your overriding point is very interesting. That when society created this prohibition, because this goes in kind of like a prohibition mindset. When you create a prohibition which criminalizes everything, then that discussion is much harder than it's like, okay, no. A responsible adult can do this versus a kid. Like if someone's 16 and it's like, well, if you're not allowed to do this either, then why am I not allowed to do this? You can't create that kind of time distinction. Like, hey, well, your brain is still developing. Like, it's like, no. The change in law actually allowed you to be a better parent in that sense, where you can explain and give reasons why, hey, yeah, you can't do this. People that are young, it's worse for them or whatever.
I'm going to send this now to the state legislature. I'm going to say, hey, let's legalize everything. Listen to this. It's make us all better parents.
As we say this on the recorded line. But go ahead.
No, as I said, I'll send it to the state legislature. Let's see how they do. It's the Speaker of the House. But just to finish up, this is interesting, James, because we did a show just recently on the American Revolution. And on a serious note, one of the discussion and questions was about how do you look at historical figures and if they're 100% pure or not, and if like a hero, and if they got these flaws, can they still be a hero? And I think this conversation is interesting because it's talking about like our parents. We all as kids look at our parents like they're our heroes, and then as we get older, sometimes we get disappointed that they're actually not. They're human beings. They're trying just like we are. And sometimes
how do we deal with that, basically, once we understand that our parents weren't perfect and can they still be our heroes if we see their imperfections? We still love them. Yeah. And that's probably part of the job when you're raising the kid, if you can do it, is to make sure that they understand that you're not perfect, but being perfect isn't what the standard is, so to speak. Like you can still be aspirational and not be perfect. Find something else to be. I always try hard. I never give up. Like there's other things that you can kind of hang your hat on, as opposed to I'm the monotheistic God of your life, and I'm perfect, and you do exactly.
That's not the right way to be a parent. I got to do this all over. No, but then the last thing I'll say is, and it's interesting too, honestly, because as human beings, as parents, we evolve as we age as well. So I see that in my
You've
journey.
Talked about that. Yeah.
I've got an interesting thing where, between my oldest and youngest kid is 17 years. And so like I was a kid in the first go around, I'm in my 20s, and here I am now I'm 47 where the youngest kid's 14. So I've had this conversation with my 27-year-old son about how different I am as a human being at when his little brother's 14 than when he was 14. Yeah, I was in my early 30s when he was in my
you've talked about this a lot. You've talked about
so I'm way more calm. I've already been a parent already. Like I don't, now I'm older too. I got lower T. Seriously, like you know what I mean. Like when I'm in my 20s or 30s, man, I was coming here, like raising hell when I come home if I had a bad day at work or something. Now I would come home and like, yeah, whatever, And so the kids also are going to respond to that differently and grow up different because of that. And I'm the same guy. You see what I'm saying? So,
yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, as like the stage in life that you are as a parent is going to influence a lot of these things as well. So yeah, man, it's,
Right.
I mean, but luckily for all of us, raising kids is not a exercise in perfection, or else human beings have been gone a long time ago. So it's really, I think for me, what this is about is just making sure there's some level of intentionality about this and knowledge, just kind of what you say, what you do, they're always watching, so to speak, but then just being intentional about you're not going to get everything, but if there's certain things, certain values, certain mindsets you do want to instill, you have to be intentional about how you interact with them and then how you interact around them or how you act around them as well. So to me, that really is the big takeaway here. So, but I think we can wrap from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Till next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk soon.